I'm with Dave Manning and Deputy John Young, and we're discussing the recent Complaints Board decision made in the case of Mr. Manning against the Planning Office for an enforcement notice. The decision is now out, it's in the public domain. Are you happy with the decision?
Yes, I am, yes.
What's it going to mean? What's the next thing that's going to happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, we have to wait for the planning to come up with a decision on the...
Right. So it's down to the planning minister to make you an offer?
That's correct.
Give you the permission for what is a tiny little piece of land which is in contention.
That's correct.
Which they say is agricultural, has got no agricultural use whatsoever, we all know that, but that's what they say.
And I can't agree that it is agricultural, because it was the area for the for landscaping at the edge of the store.
For those people who don't know, Field 1007 at St John was a field, agricultural field, not very big. What was it, a couple of acre and a half, something like that? What was it?
I mean, what's left now is, I think, just over the Vergee.
Just a Vergee. But just to make it quite clear, most of the land is built on. You built your shed, your workshop shed,
yeah.
You built a decent-sized house, you've got your domestic curtilage, and there's a tiny little patch of green land at the back, which remains as a label of agricultural land. It's a complete joke, and that's what they say is agricultural land. Obviously, it ought to be gardened. If you grew cabbages in it, it'd be illegal. If a farmer grows them in it, that's okay. So that's the nonsense we're at. Next to you is Deputy Young, but of course you used to be the chief officer at this madhouse we call the Planning Office.
10 years ago. Right?
10 years ago. Was it the same then?
Well, some of the challenges were the same, but I think the department in those days used to try and help people, both in dealing with planning applications and where there are problems. I think what I see now, we'd rather move towards the department acting as a regulator in a kind of a more bureaucratic way, and I think that's really rather sad, I think.
This particular case arose apparently because a neighbour made a complaint. That was never made actually fully aware. Mr. Manning wasn't made fully aware of that, but that's what we guess had happened. They said at the Complaints Board hearing a complaint had been made, and it was down to things like if it was agricultural machinery on that land, that would be okay. If it was other machinery on that land, that would be illegal. Those sort of decisions, they just don't make sense, do they?
Well, I think the review board, I was very impressed with the board. The board actually got down right to the issues, and it's a very comprehensive report. And I certainly heard some very probing questions. Mrs. Christine Viber, John Mills and Geoffrey Krill, I was very impressed with their performance on the issues on the day, and I think the report is a very good one, and the outcome, I think, is a fair one. Just
before we get down to the nitty-gritty, how come you got appointed? Because you're a deputy for St Bernard, and this is a property in St John. Why isn't the St John deputy representing Mr Manning?
Well, Deputy Mike Higgins came to me and asked me would I speak to Mr Manning, as Mr Manning approached me after my election and said would I come along and have a look at his site. I agreed to have a look at that because I remembered it in my years in the 1990s being built. I wanted to have a look to see what had happened. When I got on site, I found that the site was very tidy, and I'd seen very much more messy industrial sites or areas around industrial buildings over many years, and so of course Mr Manning lives there and he's retired, so and then I was able to go through his paperwork and see, all the problems that were inherent in the paperwork that had happened. On the question of representation, I did an email. As a result of that, I did an email to the deputy and about the problems, asked him to follow it up. A subsequent conversation with him, and it was agreed that I would help Mr Manning.
I was trying to reflect upon the matter that we're told, you can always complain to your constable, you can always complain to your deputy, but in fact you can't, can you? Because when it comes to nitty-gritty, there's always a reason why they can't represent you, and you have to go searching the island, look for somebody who will.
Well, I think that's one way of looking at it. I think probably it's better to say, look, in small communities, it's always going to be difficult for members to deal with when there are neighbour disputes within their immediate locality, and there is a benefit in having an independent member come in. And so I did also speak to the constable, and he told me that he was conflicted because there were other matters that he was dealing with in relation to Mr. Manning's property. And so in the end I concluded that I was probably the only one that in that situation that could do that role. But I think there is a need for independent members to help members of the public where there is conflict situations.
Well, it's a big debate going on elsewhere, but all independent members sounds like the ideal circumstance to me, so everybody can represent anybody. But regards to this particular case, the case has been pending for several years now. In other words, Mr. Manning made an application for a review board, complaints board, several years ago, and it's taken that long to get to this. I mean, that would defeat most people, wouldn't it?
Well, I do know that Mr. Manning is an extremely tenacious man, and that's to his credit, and I've told him so. He is meticulous in his attention to detail, and in my experience there are not many citizens who can see their way through that and handle themselves with dignity and tenacity at the same time. It is a complicated setup. I'm certainly not aware of all the details in this case. Mr. Manning presented his case. He presented it himself successfully. I merely supported him in relation to the very latest matter, which is this business of the 8-year rule, which wasn't disclosed to Mr. Manning, and the planning department's action afterwards, which have been severely criticised.
Well, you were generous in only describing it as sloppy in your presentation, and that's quoted in here, but the maladministration goes much deeper than that, doesn't it? I mean, it really is quite fundamental, and bearing in mind there are other cases of a very similar nature going on about the enforcement procedure. It's not a unique case, is it?
Well, I'm not aware of the detail of other cases. I'm not representing anybody. I do know other members have got there's at least one member with a similar case. I can't recall a more thorough and critical review board finding it. Perhaps the Regis Skips report, which wasn't a complaints board but was a committee of inquiry.
Well, I was going to mention about Regis Skips because Mr. Mills, who was on this panel, led the inquiry into Regis Skips, and as he was saying at this complaints board hearing, lots of the reforms which he'd recommended following Regis Skips have still not been implemented. They are still faults at the planning department, and it was his criticism and his interrogation of the planning officer was quite active, wasn't it? I mean, he was very hard on the planning officer, but justifiably so, because the planning officer has been shown to be very deficient.
Yes, I did feel concerned for a planning officer, because to what extent he'd been personally responsible for this, I doubt. Yeah. He'd inherited this, and of course what I was really astonished with, there was no minister or assistant minister
Which
present.
Always used to be the rule. If there was a complaints board, the minister always had to turn up. That rule seems, again, another one of those rules that's gone by the by.
Well, I mean, decisions are made in the minister's name. The minister is accountable. And yet here we had an inquiry process in public where there was no minister in sight. We are waiting for the minister's response in this case. I'd be very surprised if he knew very much about this case.
I mean, on the basis of this evidence, which is not the whole story, but should heads roll? Are there people there who should lose their job? Because this incompetence, it's on page 12 of the report, it refers to decisions in the past made in a similar way, and they're talking about a process of enforcement which starts at a low level and goes up for authorization at a high level. That was the chief officer or so, the chief planner endorses it. It's totally illegal. Now, if that's the process which has been going on for the past 10 years, then there's an awful lot of decisions which are going to have to be made null and void. It's going to be a very expensive exercise, isn't it?
Well, I think we've got to wait for the Minister's response. This is a very critical report which I think the Minister has got to investigate. What are the reasons for these things that the board has found, and what does he propose to do about it? I think there is a general problem, from my point of view, for elected members. When we have a very high degree of delegation to civil servants and officers, it's extremely difficult for elected members to, as it were, engage to access processes that call those actions into account. Well, we are dependent upon the ministers, the systems are geared.
This was supposed to be a public meeting, and again, that's something I've blogged about. The fact that it's not advertised, there's no notice outside the States building or wherever it's held on the day, the parish hall in this case, to say that it's going on. There was no other member from the public there, apart from the neighbour who was an interested party. Not a single other member, not another observing States member there. And it's the same if you go in the courts today. There's a couple of States members on trial, but I bet there's no States members in there watching. The States members simply don't get involved, do they?
Well, I think the actual board members excelled themselves on this day. They did a really good job. But I think there are issues around the process. I had a number of problems. Advanced publicity is one thing. The other thing is I certainly did not feel comfortable that the interested party, the neighbour, although the interested party is referred to in this report, and yet she wasn't able to say anything. I think that's really a questionable situation. There should be, if we have open processes, it should be accessible to all parties. I understand that's not in the law, but I think that's something that should receive attention.
There was also hints in the report about the old PALS Act, because you had an ex-planning officer who used to work for the planning department, who's now got a planning consultancy out there and is a free spirit, but he was getting letters before Mr Manning got them, or instead of Mr Manning receiving them.
Well,
so this is the old PALS Act, isn't it?
Well, I think the report doesn't say that, but of course it does mention by name a former planning officer, and he was present in the room, yet he wasn't able to say anything. So I think there's all these sort of questions.
He did utter a few words in the van when the public meeting, because of the rain, had to adjourn to the van to shelter from the rain. And he did utter a few words in the van, so I don't know if that amounts to a public meeting or not.
Well, I think one is left with all these questions. It was the first time I've been to one of those hearings, and I repeat, I was really impressed with the performance of the board members. They were top drawer. But the processes that surround it, I really think, do need upgrading. For example, there was no recording of the proceedings.
Absolutely, and I'm amazed at the quality of the report that's come from that, because there's a lot of very lengthy submissions recorded there very accurately from my memory, but as you say, there was no mechanical recording going on.
No, and I think there should be.
And for the record, there should be an archive of this stuff with all the texts, all the transcripts. It should all be on record.
Well, I know, for example, when I was a member of the States of Guernsey Planning Appeals panel, those proceedings are recorded. Although they're informal, they are recorded. And I think what we see in Jersey is that we've only got 2 rooms in the States building which are geared up with recording apparatus, and yet there are all these other important meetings, planning panel meetings, these sort of meetings of complaints board, where we do need to have a proper record.
Well, even this meeting we're having now, I'm having a meeting with you, but due to the generosity of somebody else, we're using their office to record you, but there's not even any rooms in the States building where you can meet the voters.
No, I mean, I think there is an issue about States members' facilities generally. I work from home, I carry my office around with me, many members do. And I think, if one does one's best as a States member to help people when people come forward and ask for help, as Mr Manning does. But I think it would be better if, when we're upgrading our systems and processes, we can review those resources. One possibility, and it's a strong one and I favour it, is the introduction of an independent ombudsman office, where the investigation work can be done independently. And I think,
well, of course, scrutiny could offer a better service, but they won't look at individual complaints.
Well,
this is part and parcel of the problem.
Well, it's not a matter of won't, Mike.
Well, they say
the rules that scrutiny panels work to prevent that happening. I'm as chairman of a scrutiny panel. There have been a number of occasions where people have come to us with matters that they want us to investigate. We can't do it under the rules because they concern individual matters, they concern often individual officers. We can't investigate them. The only thing I can do, and I have done, is to refer them to the Public Accounts Committee, which is chaired by Deputy Tracy Varua. But I know that group are very overloaded.
Out of this one complaints board, there are many, many issues. Now, you won't take them all up. Which ones of these issues that are arising from this complaints board are you going to take up further?
Well, I think, first of all, we'll wait for the Minister's report, because I think there's actions concerning Mr Manning which are important to him. I will be looking to see what improvements the Minister is planning to make to the systems in the department to try and overcome them. The general issue, I think, is going to be on following up the Ombudsman, because I think we have to recognise the States GREF that do the administration, I think, do their very best with the very, very limited resources they've got. And I think there does need to be the additional resource of an ombudsman, and I'm very happy for the GREF to run that. But the ombudsman facility needs to be in place.
Will we have a proposition before the next election from you on that?
Well, I'm very much hoping that you'll see a proposition from the PPC committee, in which I'm a member, because it's also an action that's in the machinery of government improvements in the draft paper.
Those ombudsman meetings, I wasn't allowed to make any film. I wasn't even allowed to. I was allowed to take one photograph once they'd left the building. That's all they said to me, and I don't know where they got that rule from. I'm filming you today. The world's not going to end because I'm filming you today. Why shouldn't people film these public meetings?
I've got no problem at all with filming. For example, I think you criticised me in your blog that I didn't say a different
I only
word.
reported what you said, so I wasn't.
I said nothing because I thought well, it wasn't the occasion. But I got no problem at all, and I think citizens' media that say fairly what happened, and from what I saw of your blog on that matter, you fairly represented it. And although if I might say so, Mike, you spiced it up with a bit of amusement, which is journalists all do that. So I can't criticise you for that. But I think generally this openness is we should be more open in our process.
Well, as you know, I emailed you this very morning. There's a culture conference this weekend. I'm not even allowed to film that, and I'm paying for it.
Well, I'm astonished at that, and I really don't understand. And I will be speaking to Rod Bryant, because I really don't understand that at all.
I'm going to return to Mr. Manning. You've heard what the deputy has to say. Yeah. What other things would you like to happen? You've got, I believe, I don't know if you're allowed to tell us, but you've actually got another complaints board in the queue.
Well, there's still another case regarding planning, which is still waiting to go back to court.
Right.
At the moment, we're waiting to see what the lawyer for planning has to say about it.
Now, there's no mention in this about your costs, of course. They say, oh, make another application and we won't charge you a fee. But over the years, you must have incurred huge costs fighting this incredible bureaucracy. Has anybody ever offered to pay it back?
No, never.
Do you think they ought to?
Well, I think so, to a certain extent, they should certainly pay a lot of it back.
Man gets money for his fireworks. I think you've been induced, required, obligated to make all sorts of planning applications and appeals, and you've lost a lot of money from it. I think they ought to pay that back too, don't you?
Oh, yes, I agree. I mean, it has cost me thousands of pounds over the years.
Right.
I mean, and of course, there is still another case at the moment still ongoing with the Treasury and Resources, where they have been overcharging me on my loan.
So there's plenty of stuff in the offing yet, Deputy. The Deputy for St Bernard's might yet be paying a few more visits to St John. How does that grab you?
Well, I think Mr Manning, is more than capable of handling these other matters on his own. Not that I'm dipping out, but what I wanted to do was help Mr Manning in this one specific case where these, concerning these enforcement actions, and I think that is done. I think for my purpose, we've got the issues of principle which we covered in this interview to follow up, and there's plenty to do. So I'm sorry to disappoint, but I'm not going to become the number one member for all complaints boards.
You might be looking for somebody else for the next one then, Dave.
Well, I mean, I'll do a lot of it myself. I mean, I have been doing it for years, and I'm quite prepared to do it.
I think lots of Jersey residents have discovered at the end they have to do it for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's the best way.
Thanks much indeed.
The gain popularity, particularly well, not much in Europe.